Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of my 20,000 subscriber celebration. The energy and the vibes are totally different today, so if you missed it, in part 1 we got actually really philosophical. We got philosophical and technical. What did we cover in part 1? We talked about servitors, sigils, we talked a lot about gods, we talked about spirits and death, witchcraft and spell work. So if you missed that, I will link that video down below in the description box. But today we have the random category, which is just random spirituality, magic, conspiracy theories. We're also going to talk a lot about the astral realm and meditation, altered states of consciousness. There were a lot of questions about my personal practice and my personal life. We're going to talk about some controversial topics, and then we're also going to talk about mental health. So we've got a lot going on today. As always, I will have timestamps on this video, so if you want to skip to a particular topic that's interesting to you, go for it. I just have to say, I just finished filming a collaboration yesterday with another content creator that should be out next week. We talked about glamour magic and sex magic in depth. I already know the video is going to be demonetized because of how open and vulnerable and raw we got with the topic of sex magic and glamour magic. So I'm really excited for everyone to see that video. And also it kind of like, I don't know, it reignited my inspiration. If you could tell in part 1, I was feeling a little tired and a little bit sluggish, but after that conversation yesterday, like this morning, I was listening to Vivaldi all morning. I put on some Brainiac perfume, which I have this Brainiac perfume. It smells kind of like sexy pepper is the only way that I can explain it. So that is the mood for today going into this Q&A. I'm feeling very, very refreshed. I'm excited for all of these conversations. So let's go. Let's do it. First question, starting us off strong. I wanted to ask you what your thoughts are on the CIA Gateway Project, and if you think it relates to chaos magic. I see it as a standardized, systematic form of chaos magic that people can use with reliable results. I know it's ironic to think that chaos could be standardized, but also in the sense they try to explain the methods in terms of quantum mechanics. So for anybody that's not familiar, the CIA Gateway Project, this is just me talking about it off the top of my head, so please do your own research, but it was something that was released in the 80s. The CIA basically confirmed that they were doing these experiments, and when in certain altered states of consciousness, they confirmed, according to their beliefs, that we are no longer bound by space and time. So there were these experiments to have people get into these altered states of consciousness to actually travel to the past and also travel to the future. And it was a really big deal to have this come out from the CIA. So this whole Gateway Project, there's meditations, and there's like a whole method. You can look up a PDF on it. You can actually go do some research and find the techniques that they were using to do this. It was a lot of like transcendental meditation techniques, among some other things, I believe. I have personally never done the meditations, but I do think it's really interesting to think about going into altered states of consciousness and how we are no longer bound by space and time. I don't know if anyone has ever had a dream where you're dreaming and it feels like you've been in this dream for hours or years even. A dream can span for so long inside your mind, and then when you come out of that dream, you realize that it's potentially maybe only been 7 seconds. Only 7 seconds have passed as you were having this dream that felt like years. The astral realm and meditations and brainwave states is all fascinating, and it potentially is a way to bend the space-time conundrum. And as far as it being a sort of a standardized form of chaos magic, yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think people get thrown off by the word chaos, and when they think of chaos, they just think of that it's chaotic and disordered and all over the place and there is no rhyme or reason, etc. But the chaos in chaos magic doesn't really necessarily mean that, and I'm not going to go on a whole rant about that in this video, but I do think that there is a standardized way to get you into those altered states of consciousness to experience this freedom from the space-time conundrum. Quantum mechanics is so fascinating, and I'm not going to claim to understand it all because I really don't. But if you read a lot of books by Peter Carroll, I mean, Peter Carroll is extremely knowledgeable when it comes to stuff like this. I know there's like a lot of controversy that surrounds him, but he was obviously the one that kind of founded chaos magic, and his system of magic is kind of the antithesis of what you would think chaos magic is, because again, that word chaos, you're thinking is just like random and chaotic and crazy and lazy and disorganized, but the way Peter Carroll approaches magic is actually very methodical and systemized. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it can be a really powerful way to explore your spirituality, explore your magic, a really good way to get into chaos magic, because you're in a realm that nobody understands right now. I do know a couple people people that have been doing the Gateway Project, the meditations, and from what I've heard, it has totally changed their life. The experience for them was incredible. So interesting stuff for sure. I don't know if here's the thing for me, the meditations that I have already are so vivid and profound. I'm almost like nervous to try anything like that, to try the Gateway Project meditations, because for me, I fly in the astral realm too easily. I fly way too easily, and I have a harder time staying connected to my body. So, you know, if I'm feeling stagnant in my practice, maybe I'll try that at one point, but I don't know if I'm ready for that level yet, because I'm already experiencing incredible things in my meditations. I'm good where I'm at, okay? I don't need to be playing with that yet. So, but if you do, more power to you. Next question is, do other people feel energy in their hands while doing workings? Also, do you have any tips for anyone that heals people by touch? So when I was talking to this person a little bit more, just to gain more clarity, it seems like this person may potentially be an empath. And there's many different types of empaths, but an empath is, I guess, is a bare minimum definition, someone that absorbs the energy from other people. And some people do this by touch. Some people do it with emotions. So if you're standing next to someone, you're absorbing their emotions. There's many different absorption methods, I suppose, but it sounds like that you might be an empath in this case. And yes, there are definitely some shielding and grounding techniques that I think are really helpful. I do want to say I have a video on protection magic that does go into mental shielding a little bit more. So I think that mental shielding in general is something that you're going to want to learn just for your own sanity, so you're not constantly absorbing everyone's emotions and physical ailments and all of that stuff all the time. But as far as tips for if you are someone that heals people by touch, you might be one of those empaths that's really healing and absorbing the ailments from other people's bodies. But you just want to make sure that you are not absorbing their ailments and then having it go into your body and nowhere else. Because people who heal by touch, you are at a higher risk for absorbing other people's negative crap in their bodies, and you definitely don't want to be doing that. Just speaking from my own personal experience, I am a healthcare practitioner, as some of you know, and I'm a medical intuitive. I work on people with my hands, and so this is something that I personally do all the time. But you're gonna want to learn how to connect to the ground, how to connect to earth energy, so that way when you're healing people by touch, you are absorbing the pain or absorbing the illness out of their body, but you're also pushing it down into earth energy so that it gets recycled back through the earth and it doesn't stay in your body, because you will burn out so fast if you don't learn how to mentally shield yourself, if you don't learn how to connect and ground to the earth, and you don't want to hit that point of burnout. So like a basic grounding, I have a video on that as well, how to ground to earth energy, but you would basically just visualize roots coming out of your being wherever your body is connecting to the floor, whether you're sitting down or your feet are touching the floor, whatever part of your body is touching the ground. You want to visualize these roots coming from your body or extending down deep into the earth's core, and then visualize somewhat of an energetic orb in the center of the earth. And it's really warm and inviting and comforting, and you're going to visualize your roots latching onto that orb for the duration that you are healing that person. So then if you're touching someone, you're healing them, you are absorbing the illnesses out of their body and basically funneling it down into the earth, and you become this medium or this conduit, I guess. I can't think of the right word right now, but it's not staying within you, it's going back into the earth to have that energy recycled again. So that would be my biggest tip, is learning how to mentally shield for when you don't want to be healing people and you're not ready to do that and you're exhausted, or maybe you just want to have your shields up for the day because you're busy doing other stuff. And then when you are healing someone, taking that mental shield down, learning how to ground to the earth, and then drawing upon that energy. And as far as the first question goes, do other people feel energy in their hands while doing workings? Yes, I mean, it totally depends on the person. I think a lot of people do start to feel energy in their hands when they're doing workings, especially for the first time and they're not used to that sensation. That is something that I experience a lot still in my magical practice, especially as more of like a medical intuitive that's touching people and, you know, working to heal people. I feel a lot of energy through my hands, but some people don't at all. You know, it just really depends on the person. There's no right or wrong way. It's not like you're more magical if you feel it in your hands or don't feel it in your hands. But yes, that is totally normal. Sometimes it can feel like a warm sensation or vibration, a tingly, you know, something like that. But I think that just means that you're channeling a lot of energy through your hands, and I think that's a wonderful thing. The next question is, what do you as a chaos magician think of all the UFO, UAP information coming out right now? Is it finally UFO disclosure? Do you have any thoughts on the phenomenon or the UFO intelligence? Okay, I have to preface this by saying that aliens freak me out. A lot of people, like, if you're close to me, you know that aliens freak me out. I don't like it. Do I think that aliens exist? Absolutely, 100%. Do I want to talk about them and think about them? No, because that weirds me out. And it's so funny. I'll work with ghosts and spirits and gods all day long, but when it comes to aliens, hard no. That is way too creepy for me. I will say I'm a hardcore skeptic and I don't trust our government at all. I do not think that anything's being released right now that actually confirms that aliens exist, although that would be really cool, but, or maybe not cool because it also kind of terrifies me, but I think this is used as a distraction method. As always, the government wants us looking one way while they can sneakily do something else in the background. So I don't necessarily think that what's coming out right now is finally UFO disclosure. And I've also heard a lot of people talking about it, that just because they're confirming these unidentified flying objects, it doesn't necessarily mean it's from aliens, because there's a lot of different things that could be classified as unidentified flying objects. I know a lot of people want it to be aliens and they want that confirmation. Are they real or are they not real? But I, unfortunately, am a little bit more skeptical, and I think it's the government trying to distract us from something else that's going on that they don't want us to know about. So I suppose that's my opinion on that. Do you know much about MBTI cognitive functions? If so, how do you think they affect chaos magic from a psychological perspective? Have you ever come across or heard of subliminals? A lot of people, particularly on YouTube, make them to try to reprogram their subconscious mind, and I was just wondering if you had heard of them and how they relate to magic. I think the subconscious mind is referenced a lot, especially in chaos magic. Okay, so there's kind of two different questions here. Let's talk about MBTI first. So if anybody's not familiar, MBTI refers to the Myers-Briggs personality type system, where there's these 16 different personality types. Yes, I actually know a lot about this system. This system was actually based on, I know a lot of people immediately write it off and they say, oh, another stupid personality test. But actually, if you get into it, it's way more complicated than most people think. It's based off Carl Jung's work, and I am very much a fan of Carl Jung. It's based off all of his work as far as introverts and extroverts go, intuitive and sensors, thinkers and feelers, perceivers and judgers, etc. And then they kind of like took his work and then created this personality system out of it. Don't quote me too much here because I can't remember the development of the system. But yes, I do know a lot about the system and the 16 different personality types. I am huge into the MBTI system, and I think that it can be a source to help not only you understand other people and learn how to communicate and work with them better, but also for magical purposes. I think knowing your personality type can kind of help you figure out which magical practice you may just be naturally more gifted at or more inclined towards. And this deserves, like, you know what? I really want to do an MBTI video so bad, but I know that that community would watch my video and just berate everything I say because it's very, very technical. And if you don't get it perfectly technical, because there's cognitive functions and stackings, and it's not just, so you get these 4 letters, right? Like, for example, I'm an INFJ. I kind of hover between INFJ and INTJ, but really once I go deeper into the cognitive stacking, I was able to find that I am definitely an INFJ. I thought for the longest time I was INTJ, but no, I'm 1000% INFJ. For anybody that does Myers-Briggs, you'll kind of know what that means, but also not really, because INFJ is the most misunderstood type, period, in the system, because it is the most uncommon and weird. So some people may think that they know what INFJ means, but I guarantee they probably don't. Anyways, so the question was, how do you think they affect chaos magic from a psychological perspective? So I think that people who have a N or a P are probably going to be more inclined towards chaos magic. I do have an N. I do not have a P though. I'm a hard J. This conversation is for people that don't know what Myers-Briggs is. This is all like a totally different language that I'm speaking right now, but I do think that intuitives, the personality types that have the N in it, are are going to have an easier time with chaos magic. And I used to listen to these podcasts. There was this neuroscientist that I would listen to, and it was so incredible to hear his experiments with people based on their personality types. Like, personality psychology to me is so interesting. He would basically hook people's brains up, and then he would have them perform a task or make a decision or just like do something in general, and he would have them all do the same exact thing. But depending on your personality type, different regions of the brain were lighting up as you were doing the exact same task as another person with a different personality type. So our brains are literally wired differently depending on what your personality is. How amazing is that? That is so amazing. So yeah, I think you can blend psychology, just the knowledge of personality psychology with magic to see what your natural gifts are, what you're going to be more inclined towards, and then also how to communicate with people that have completely different brain wirings from you and operate differently. If I know someone's Myers-Briggs, I can communicate with them in a way that they will better receive, and it's so helpful. So I love that system. I recommend everyone figuring out their personality type. Although there's like some really cheesy sites that you go to take the personality test, and it's really lame. Like, they don't go into the cognitive stacking at all, and it's this watered down. It reminds me of astrology a little bit, because astrology can be so deep and complex, but oftentimes astrology is really watered down and people only focus on their sun sign, and they're like, I'm a Pisces and that's all I am. And there's so much more to astrology than that. That is how I feel about the Myers-Briggs system. People are like, oh, I'm an IN, blah, 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 and then they don't understand the cognitive stacking that goes behind that. And I'm like, you are missing out on so much. You are on the tip of the iceberg, and there's an entire giant world of iceberg underneath that deep, dark water to explore. So anyways, that's my rant about that. The next question is, do you believe in spirit guides? And if so, do you have a special way that you honor them? That is such a complicated question. I think this kind of goes along, honestly, I probably should have put this in the spirits category. I don't know why I didn't do that, but this kind of goes along with our whole conversation in part 1 of this video series when we were talking about gods, we were talking about the collective unconscious and spirits and all of that. I don't necessarily know if I believe in spirit guides in the sense of the ones that you're born with that are stuck with you for life. I'm not totally closed off to that idea. I am open to the idea that, you know, maybe there is a guardian angel or some sort of spirit guide that's with you for life or assigned once you're born out into the world. But I do believe that there are spirit guides in the sense of any sort of spiritual entity, whether it is a god, whether it's an ancestor, or maybe it's not human at all and it's a different type of spirit. I believe that there are spiritual entities that can be guides for us throughout different points in our life. So I think for me, my perspective on spirit guides is that some come and some go. You know, like, I'll work with some spirit guides for a period of my life where I really need help on a very specific thing. Maybe they come during the darkest part of my spiritual awakening when I really need them then, and then I never see them again. And I have another spirit guide that comes into my life and helps me with something completely different. So I think my relationship with spirit guides really just depends on where I'm at in life, because I have had many spirit guides over the course of my life. That might actually be a decent video idea, just talking about all the spirit guides that I've had over the course of my life, when those archetypes showed up, and kind of how I worked with them. Because the second part of this question is there a special way that you honor them? It really just depends on, you know, the spirit that I'm working with. I mean, the way that I honor my ancestors is going to be, which I would consider a form of a spirit guide, is going to be very different than a non-human spirit guide, or even a deity or a god that I'm working with, which I would even consider gods a potential form of spirit guide. I think that the whole term spirit guide can be just like this umbrella with all these different guides underneath it. So it's really hard for me to answer that question. Yes and no. I think they can come and go, and there's many different ways that I honor the spirit guide depending on who they are. The next question is, I would love to know a bit more about your shamanic practices. I think you mentioned that it's a form of universal shamanism, but I'd like to know something else. Is it a form of magic on its own? Is it an open practice, or do you have to be initiated, or anything else that you can tell us about this topic? Okay, let me go on a whole rant about shamanism because I feel like it's not something that I get to talk about a lot on this channel. And there's a couple reasons why I don't talk about it a lot on this channel. And that will kind of become apparent as I talk more about shamanism. So for me, shamanic practices are, if you're in the witchcraft community, I would consider shamanic practices similar to maybe hedge witchcraft. Not the exact same. I'm just trying to convey somewhat what it's like if you're familiar with hedge witchery, but it's a lot of work on the astral realm, and you're almost always going on some sort of shamanic journey in order to heal something, either to heal someone else or to heal yourself. There's soul retrievals where you go in and you go into an altered state of consciousness or a trance-like state, and you retrieve bits and pieces of your soul that may have been lost at some point of your life. My dog is groaning in the background. There's work with power animals, working with animal spirits in shamanism, and it really depends on the type of shamanism that you practice as well. I will say shamanism as a whole is not a closed practice. However, there are some practices within the shamanism umbrella that are closed and that you do have to be initiated into. I will say there are some, because of that, because of the indigenous practices, I would never call myself a shaman, because for me, to call yourself a shaman means that you have been initiated by an indigenous group in person, not just taking an online course, but actually being initiated in person to be a shaman of that specific culture. So I would never ever call myself a shaman. However, it is appropriate for someone to call themselves a shamanic practitioner if they incorporate some shamanic elements into their spiritual practice. And for me, that's in the form of astral work. I love going on astral journeys to heal parts of myself and to achieve some sort of spiritual enlightenment. It's a lot of visualization, so if you are someone that does not enjoy visualization, that might not be for you. But shamanism isn't just about the astral realm and just going on shamanic journeys. There's a lot of other healing modalities. Again, depending on the culture, the type of shamanism, this is going to change, but there's a lot of like healing modalities. There's a lot of like prophecy and divination in some cultures as well, so it's really fascinating. But for me, the shamanic components that I bring into my practice are more on the astral realm, and how I travel through the astral is very shamanic. Like if you're going on an astral journey, I mean, again, the whole point of shamanic journeys matters. There is this healing component to it, but also you typically find yourself in a forest or a bush or something, and you're visualizing this as you're going through your meditation. And then moving on from the forest and bush, you are traveling to deeper parts. There's also the shamanic concept of the upper world, the middle world, and the lower world, or realm. It might be realm, not world. Upper realm, middle realm, lower realm, whatever, whatever the technical words are for it. There is an upper and a middle and a lower, and you can travel to each one. Each one is said to have different types of spiritual entities there to work with. The reason why I don't talk about shamanism too much on my channel is because for me, what I incorporate, it's pretty much all astral work. And it's like, how do you talk about that on a YouTube platform? I can't really show you because it's all in my mind. Like witchcraft. Witchcraft is so easy to make videos about because I can physically show you stuff. I can physically show you spells that I'm doing and, you know, doing candle work around or whatever. But when it comes to shamanic stuff, it's so abstract and in the astral realm that it's difficult to make videos about it. I suppose I could. It would just be me talking about experiences and things like that. So if that's something that people are interested in, please let me know. I know chaos magic and witchcraft are super hot right now, and that's all anyone wants. I've offered to make more shamanic videos in the past, and there doesn't ever seem to be an interest for shamanic videos, so I just haven't really done it. But let's go back to the actual questions here to make sure I'm not missing anything. Is it a form of magic on its own? I would say yes. I would say that it is a total different form of magic on its own. The style is very different. The goals are very different. And again, shamanism is just like a big umbrella, and then you have a bunch of different cultures underneath that practicing different styles of shamanism. I'm not gonna get into the controversy of the word shamanism because I know that that derives from a very specific culture, but now as things have adapted, we're kind of using it as an umbrella term to really encompass a lot of different indigenous practices. So I don't want somebody in the comments being actually, you know, having somebody say, actually, you're incorrect. Yes, I know the word shamanism derives from a very, very specific indigenous culture. However, that is not the way that most people are using it nowadays anyways. We're really talking about just all these indigenous practices. But I think it's really interesting under the idea of universal shamanism and not practicing any particular culture is that if you look at anthropological studies, this is so fascinating. A lot of these indigenous cultures all over the world were practicing very similarly. Their medicine women or their medicine men were doing very similar techniques and styles of healing people. And this was back before people couldn't write letters. They didn't have any contact with other clans or tribes across the world, okay? So these tribes or these indigenous cultures didn't have any way of contacting each other, yet somehow they all share very similar techniques across the globe. That is really curious. I mean, the ingredients that are used are very different, right? Because if you're living in one region, you're gonna have one plant that maybe doesn't grow in another plant. So you're using different ingredients, but the techniques are seen to be very similar among some cultures. So it's really fascinating thinking this idea of universal shamanism, how we are all connected as a collective and we are all tapped into this collective unconscious, even though we don't have communication with this whole other group of humans on the other side of the world, we end up tapping into that collective unconscious and drawing upon the same conclusions and using similar techniques. So it's just really, really cool to see how all humans are connected. But again, yes, if you want to get into a very specific flavor of shamanism and getting more into like very unique indigenous practices, yes, some of those are closed. You will have to be initiated, etc. I had a question regarding building community. It's something I've seen a lot recently in pagan and witchy spaces and would love your opinion on it. What do you think your community, as you define it, could be doing better? And in regards to the broader witchy, pagan, occult sphere. This is such a good question, and I think my answer applies to both my personal community and then also just the witchy, occult scene in general. I'm gonna kind of say the same for both. I recently did a collaboration. When I was filming that collab yesterday, I just had this conversation, so it's fresh in my mind. I think there are two things that we could do better as a community, and the first one is I'm really tired of other people telling other people what to do. It's really frustrating when new people are coming into witchcraft or the occult sphere in general, and then you have all these other people telling them exactly what they must do and that you have to do it this way or you're wrong. I think people get so caught up with this traditional educational system that we typically all go through, where we go to school for 12 years, right? Most of us at least. And then some of us go off to college, some of us don't, you know, whatever. But we're in school for a really long time and we're taught that there is a right way to learn things and there's a wrong way to learn things. And the occult and witchcraft in general, it is hidden knowledge. It is hidden for a reason. You have to work for it. There is no right or wrong way to do it. It is all purely experimentation. I mean, sure, I would say that there are some ways that are maybe more effective than others, but everyone's a little bit different. And I find it really frustrating when I go into Facebook groups or anywhere else on Reddit. Oh my gosh, I love being on Reddit just to read what people are saying to each other. It's hilarious. But there is no right or wrong way to do things. And I think the ego, everyone's egos need to take a little bit of a backseat, and we all need to realize that just because something works for you doesn't mean that it's going to work for someone else, and it also doesn't mean that you're better than everyone else. So that's the first thing that I would say about our community, is that I get really frustrated seeing people tell other people what to do. There's a difference between giving guidance, like I attempt to give a lot of guidance in my videos, but I also leave a lot of room for people to customize things or, you know, switch things up if it doesn't work for them. I've said in a lot of my videos that you do not have to do the same thing as I do. Please just use this as inspiration. The second thing that I think our community could do better is I wish that there was a lot more play and experimentation. I am so tired of people asking for permission to do things in their own magical practices. People will ask me the simplest things of, oh, can I substitute rose petals instead of rosemary? Try it. Go for it. See what happens. I am pretty sure nothing bad is going to happen because you substituted rose petals for rosemary in a spell. Like, we need this mad scientist energy that I keep talking about over and over again. I want people to be their own scientists. I want people to explore and play and experiment and be open-minded. What is with the closed-mindedness? What is that? So that is something I want to see more out of our community. I want to see more experimentation. I don't want to see people asking for permission. You don't need to have my permission to do anything in your own magical practice. That is you, and it's on you to figure out what works best for you and no one else. So that is my rant, I guess, answering that question. I hope that was a nice rant and not a mean rant. But anyways, next question is, how far do you believe psychic abilities can go? Like, where do you draw the line and say, nope, that's not possible? This is something I struggle with so much more than you know. This is something, there's certain things like telekinesis, for example. I have a really hard time believing that that is an actual real thing unless I see it myself. However, if I'm a scientist, if I am a true scientist, it is my job to stay as open-minded as possible while still being skeptical, of course, and rational and really questioning things that are around me. But it's my job to remain open-minded to the possibility that I am wrong. So even though I don't personally jive with telekinesis, I have heard other people say that it's legit, that that is what they are experiencing. And who is it up to me to say that that person's experience is not valid? So I struggle with this because I tend to be more of a skeptical person, as you guys know. And so there are times where I draw a line and say, that's a little bit too far. That's not possible. Like witches flying, for example. No, I can't just get up on my rooftop and go fly on a broomstick out to the Netherlands. Like that's not a thing. But I'm also constantly surprised. I used to think that claircognizance is a psychic ability that I think I do the best at. I've talked about my mediumship abilities in part 1 and how that's probably my most underdeveloped psychic ability. I feel like claircognizance is my strongest psychic ability. And there are times where I have surprised myself and I was like, there is absolutely no way that what just happened is real. There is no way that I could know that I would have those thoughts in my brain, or it just, so it's tough because I'm constantly being skeptical, but at the same time, I want to remain open-minded. So I don't think there is a line. I think it's blurry. I think it's, if there is a line, it's a blurry line and the line keeps moving constantly. So I guess my general rule of thumb is if it's not harming you and it's not harming other people, then what's the harm in believing in it? Obviously, if you believe in something that's causing you harm or causing other people harm and it's a detriment to your life, you know, maybe you're slipping into some sort of spiritual psychosis, that's not okay and people need to get help. But if it's not hurting anyone, what is the problem with exploring the possibility that that is a legitimate thing? There's so much brain potential that we are not even remotely tapping into. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that. It's changing all the time for me, my perspective on that. My question is about the art of tattoos. I find the whole tattoo process spiritual, empowering, and magical, from choosing and or creating the art, consulting with a tattoo artist, and then the physical process of getting the tattoo for me is a magical way to express myself. I was wondering if you have any opinions on tattoos as part of a magical practice. Can you have a sigil tattooed? Yeah, so I talked about this a little bit in my Greek vlog because I ended up getting a tattoo in Greece and I did a little bit of spell work when that was happening. I think that using the pain from the tattooing experience is such a powerful way to have a sigil charged on your body forever because it's continuously being fed by your energy as it's literally on your skin. So yeah, getting a sigil tattooed on your body, and then so during the moment of actually having it tattooed and I'm feeling that pain, all I do is focus on the image in my mind's eye. So like they were tattooing the back of my leg. By the way, for anybody that doesn't know, I have a lot of tattoos. You can't tell with like, you know, like clothes on and stuff, but I have a ton of tattoos. And so what I do is during the tattoo session, I'm using that pain and thinking about the image of the sigil in my mind. And so you don't even have to think about the actual intention. It's kind of similar to sex magic when you're using the orgasm to charge a sigil. You don't actually have to think about the intention in the moment. All you have to do is put that image in your mind's eye, or you could even draw it out and literally stare at it as they tattoo it on your back or your shoulder or your leg or whatever. And you are charging that sigil as you're experiencing this pain. And yeah, I totally believe that the whole process can be spiritual when you're creating. Art is just spiritual in general. I mean, you can make it a whole sacred experience, from designing the tattoo and getting it drawn on your body and having it tattooed and all of that stuff. But really for me, it's about using the pain in the tattooing experience to charge up the sigil. And then once it's on your body, like I said previously, that sigil is good for pretty much ever, because it is on your skin and is linked to your own energy. It's tethered to you. So you are constantly feeding that tattoo just on autopilot by having it on your body. I also think tattoos are deeply transformational. Like the very first tattoo I got, I have a full spine tattoo, and that was the first tattoo I got, which was so funny because like the spine is supposed to be one of the most painful places. And I was like, well, go big or go home. We're gonna do a full spine tattoo. It's not super elaborate or anything, but it was so spiritually moving. It was almost like I was moving into a new phase of life, because I was shedding a lot of toxic stuff in my life. It was during my spiritual awakening when I got this tattoo, and now every time I see it in the mirror, you know, when I step out of the shower or whatever and I see my back tattoo, I'm reminded of the person I was and the person I am today, and I'm so fucking proud of myself for that, you know? So I just think it can be totally spiritual, totally transformational. I love tattoos. What are your thoughts about modern practices seemingly transitioning away from more nature-based spirituality to deity worship? And how do you think witchcraft and paganism will evolve from here? Yeah, so deity worship, like deity work, is a total fad right now. I mean, it really, like paganism, I remember in the early 2000s and like late 90s, paganism was all about, it was totally about the nature. It was about communing with nature and being like the weirdos out in the forest with no shoes on and sometimes no clothes at all, and you were just a hippie hugging trees, and it was beautiful. And now we have this whole fad of deity worship and beginners coming in thinking they have to work with a deity, which by the way, you don't have to work with a deity. And though I do work with gods and goddesses, I can also acknowledge that it is a bit of a fad, and there's a lot of people interested in it right now because of that. I also think it's the same with folk magic. I think we're seeing this pendulum swing because for a while Wicca was dominating the witchcraft scene, and it was so structured and regimented that now I feel like people are kind of breaking the shackles a little bit and getting into eclectic witchcraft. Like eclectic witchcraft came next, and people were obsessed with just being eclectic and pulling things from all different places. They didn't want Wicca. They did not want the structure. They didn't want the ceremony. They didn't want to have to worship a god and goddess or have a matron and, you know, that whole situation. By the way, I have no weird feelings towards Wicca. I have friends that are Wiccan, and I'm just trying to express this as a movement. But people moved away from Wicca, kind of delve deeper into eclectic witchcraft, and then that was the scene. And now it's like folk magic, right? You see this huge, everybody's talking about folk magic. Everybody wants to learn about the folk magic in the region they grew up in or where their ancestors may be coming from. I think we're seeing a lot of people move more towards ancestral work and learning about the herbs and the plants, you know, those things that were used in the region that they have a little bit more of a deeper connection to. So I see people getting back to their roots a little bit more over this next, I don't know, 5-10 year span or whatever, with the rise of interest in folk magic. And then also deity worship. Yeah, that is definitely still a fad, and it's going to be going for a while. But I also think it's just a pendulum swing, you know? I think we're going to have this huge interest in eclectic witchcraft for a really long time. I think that's also why people are drawn to chaos magic, because they like the idea of this free-flowing, ecstatic practice that they can do whatever they want without rules, without limitations. They want freedom, like true, pure, untamed freedom. And so I think we're going to be stuck in that for quite a while, actually. And then I think we're going to see the pendulum swing in the other direction. I think people are going to potentially start getting more interested in ancient grimoires and ceremonial magic. I think people are going to, after being eclectic for a while and kind of doing whatever we want, having that freedom, I think people are going to start wanting a little bit more ceremony, a little bit, maybe a little bit more pomp and circumstance, you know, and getting into the ancient grimoires and looking into that deeper. I would love to say that chaos magic will have its moment, although I think people are enticed by the idea of chaos magic, and then when they start getting into it, they realize it's actually not for them. Either it gets way too philosophical, way too fast, or they realize they actually do need more rules and structure because chaos magic is so all over the place. So I'd love to say that people will be getting into chaos magic, although I don't think chaos magic will ever be at the forefront. Like, I don't think it'll ever be mainstream because it's really for a unique type of person. So would love to see it. Don't think it's going to be chaos magic. Ceremonial magic does sometimes have a little bit too much pomp and circumstance, so I don't think everybody's going to be transitioning into becoming a ceremonial magician. I just think we're going to see more of an interest in ancient grimoires and people wanting to read those old texts and kind of get back to those types of roots, if that makes sense. But yeah, it's, I mean, like any community that exists in the world has these pendulum swings where you go from one end to another. It's really interesting to see though. Now we're getting into the next category. So we've kind of wrapped up the random category. We're going to get into the astral realm, meditation, altered states of consciousness, things like that. So first question is, do you have any experience with the Akashic Records, and what are your personal feelings and beliefs around that? So for anyone that isn't familiar, the Akashic Records, it is said to derive from Helena Blavatsky, which is the founder of the Theosophical Society. And I think that she claimed that she learned this from Tibetan monks or somewhere in the Eastern world that she took inspiration from to create a modern version of the Akashic Records. So anyways, this was like back in the 1800s. Don't ask me for the exact year because I do not remember off the top of my head. Anyways, the idea of this Akashic Records is that it's this place in the astral realm that has a record of, it's basically like if you imagine a big library, it's a record of every thought from every human that has ever existed, every deed, every memory. I feel like the Akashic Records is just a different way of saying collective unconscious. Like when we were talking about the collective pool of consciousness in our chat about gods and spirits, I feel like the Akashic Records is just a different variation of that, or maybe the exact same thing, just a slightly different wording and a slightly different way of perceiving it. So yeah, I definitely think the Akashic Records can actually be a thing. And I would say, okay, I have these crazy experiences. I have two crazy experiences. I don't know if I was experiencing some sort of past life myself, or it was a past life from someone else, or if I had entered the Akashic Records and it was just, I was exposed too quickly. The thing is, I've heard from many people that claim that they have visited the Akashic Records, which, by the way, is extremely difficult to do. And when people say that they have reached the Akashic Records, I'm always like a little bit skeptical, because that's similar to someone walking around to me and claiming, oh, I've reached total enlightenment. What? Have you really reached total enlightenment? So I don't even know if it's, you know, it's potentially something that people can reach. I just think it's really rare to reach it. So what I experienced, I don't even think it is the Akashic Records, but then some people I have talked to, some people I really value their opinion, they said that, you know, maybe you hit a certain corner of it and you were not ready for it. Because for me, it was actually a really terrifying astral trip. It was a terrifying experience for me, and it was very painful, and I don't think it's supposed to be like that. I don't think you're supposed to feel pain or fear or anything like that, but I went into a deep meditation. So the first time this happened, I was in a very, very deep meditation. I don't even know where I was floating at this point. It was so deep that I do not have any sort of recollection of where I was floating, but all of a sudden I was this man fighting in a war. I was this soldier standing on the front lines of a war, and I could feel his fear. I could feel everything going on in his body. It honestly made me want to throw up. It was so horrible. And I had nightmares about it for like the next couple nights because it was so horrific. I mean, just thinking about what people had to go through, and I can't even imagine being in that position. So that was my first experience. And then my second experience, when I was in another really deep meditation, I was this woman somewhere in South America. That's all I know. Somewhere in South America, I was this woman, and it was a long time ago. I mean, we're talking before vehicles. This was, everybody was riding around on horses. So everybody, she had been captured, or I had been captured, because I was her. I was in her body, feeling everything she was feeling. And she had her hands bound and they were dragging her behind on this horse. And so she had to like keep up and walk as she was following the horse because she had been captured and a couple other people had been captured. Anyways, it was just for a brief moment that I was experiencing her pain and her loss and her struggles. I came out of that and I cried. I bawled my eyes out. Again, was messed up for the next couple nights. I don't know why. Usually my meditations are never like that. And since then, I've never had those experiences again. Those are the only two experiences I have had that would say maybe are close to Akashic Records, but again, I don't think it's supposed to be a fearful experience when you're doing that. So I don't know. I do believe that the Akashic Records can exist, again, because I believe in a collective pool of unconsciousness. I think I tapped into either someone else's past lives or my own past lives. I don't really know. I think we're all connected anyways, and I think that we all share past lives, but that's like a whole nother conversation for another day. So yeah, it was just really interesting. So I guess I don't have any formal experiences, but there's some weird meditations for you. Do you have any information about inner work? What I mean does include shadow work things, but more like traveling into yourself like a whole other dimension. As within, so without, might be kind of what I'm thinking. I hope this makes sense. I'm getting further into witchcraft and some of the things that I'm experiencing seems pretty niche compared to the general information out there. And I ended up having a conversation with this person afterwards to just get a little bit better clarity. This to me feels like world building, working on your mind palace or your inner temple. They can kind of all be called the same thing. And I've been wanting to make a video about this particular subject for a really long time. So let me know if anyone's interested in world building, in building these dimensions of thought inside your own mind for shadow work, for manifestation, for all of that, building your own mind palace or inner temple to go to. I would like to recommend, I did a collaboration with the Norse Witch where we talked about the ins and outs of astral work. And for a good chunk of that video, we did actually talk about our inner temples and what that looks like. I think that kind of pertains to what you are looking for. There is a way to build these dimensions inside your mind, to do some shadow work or to go do some manifestation in your own mind. I've talked about before, I have a giant, beautiful Gothic castle inside my mind, and there's a garden where I can go and plant things, where I can literally plant flora that's tied to specific intentions and watch it grow. I can go in and water that garden, and as I'm watering that garden inside my mind, I am watering or growing the things within me that I want to grow, different personality traits. You know, if you want to kick a bad habit, you can also do some inner temple work to get rid of a bad habit. You can go into a certain room of your inner temple or mind palace and clean it up, spruce it up, and get rid of all of that gunk and garbage. It's really great for just astral work in general to have a place in your mind, somewhat on the astral realm, maybe not fully on the astral realm, but somewhat on the astral realm, where you are safe, you have a home there, whatever that looks like for you. Some people, they just have a forest that they go to and it's not even a house. Some people have like a little witch's cottage or whatever. But inside my Gothic castle, I have all these different rooms that lead to different dimensions of thought, different intentions. I have a whole room dedicated to power and passion. So when I'm wanting to harness that feeling of feeling immensely powerful, almost like that Mars energy, a little bit aggressive, I will do some work. I will do a little bit of meditation to go into my power room. And you can spend time in that room in your mind, painting the walls, the color that makes you feel powerful, putting little knickknacks up on the walls, or, you know, decorating it with furniture and chairs. Obviously, this is all heavy visualization. So if that's not your vibe, you're not gonna like any of this. You can even have pets. You can have pets in the astral realm that reside in your mind palace or in your inner temples. I have a power animal that I acquired through my shamanic studies, which was the power animal situation, I feel like, is a story in itself. I'm not going to go through all of that right now, but acquiring it through many, many different trances and doing a lot of inner work to even discover what my power animal actually was. My power animal resides in my mind palace, in my Gothic castle. And when I'm about to go on a shamanic journey, before I go on that shamanic journey, I usually make a stop at my home in the astral realm, and I go and I pick up my power animal, and then my power animal and I leave my mind palace palace to go beyond that and go deeper into the astral realm and really start exploring different places. But there's so many different things that you can do inside of a mind palace, or like I said, inner temple, whatever you want to call it. I think that's what you're referring to. And you're right, there isn't a lot of literature about this. There's almost no literature about this. I mean, Christopher Penczak did write that book, The Inner Temple of Witchcraft, but the Mind Palace specifically, that specific technique, I don't know of any literature that I could point you towards. I think it's all just personal gnosis and your own experimentation, and this whole idea of world building is really cool. I think that people who are into video games or people who are into reading, reading fantasy novels and going through that whole world building, you can make your inner world as complex as you want it to be. You can even have NPCs in there, you can do whatever you want. So yeah, let me know if people are interested in a topic like that, and I can maybe do a video on it. But for now, definitely check out the video I did with the Norse Witch, and that will at least give you a starting place to doing that work within yourself. I was wondering if you'd be comfortable commenting on some new age practices like shifting or other stuff and how it relates to spirit work and astral projection. People claim to shift their consciousness to different universes. I was wondering how plausible that actually sounds. So for this question in particular, I wasn't really able to get further clarification on the shifting aspect of it, because this is not something I'm really familiar with. I haven't really heard of people shifting their consciousness to different universes. But I will say, as part of our conversation earlier, I really do try to be as open-minded as possible. If the CIA can come out and somewhat confirm that when we're in altered states of consciousness that we are beyond the limits of time and space, that's pretty cool. And if that's the case, then I guess shifting could actually be a thing. I have a really hard time though when people say that they are shifting to, like, if we're talking about shifting to a different universe and they're shifting to different planets. I don't know. I'm a little bit more skeptical and hesitant to say that that's a legit thing. I guess I just don't have any personal experience on this to say one way or another. And I don't want to be closed-minded and say that it's not a thing when, maybe it's something that I just personally misunderstand. But I guess you could do a lot of spirit work, and I guess that would be considered astral projection then if you're shifting to a whole nother universe. So yeah, I wish I could be more helpful, but I'm just not super familiar with it. How do you know if you've reached an altered state of consciousness? Okay, now we can talk about something that I really know a lot about. So there's different brainwave states. I do plan, I'm hoping in the next month I can do an updated video going over all the brainwave states, going over everything you need to know for meditation and altered states of consciousness, and tackling this question in particular, because this question is one that I get a lot. How do you know that you're in this altered state of consciousness? The short answer is it's going to be slightly different for everybody. So what works for one person may not work for another person, but it also depends on which brainwave state you're talking about. Because as we're awake and alert, right now as I'm talking to you, I am in a beta brainwave state. You, as you're listening to me, are also probably in a beta brainwave state. And there's varying levels of beta. There's like low beta, there's a more high beta, but overall when we're awake, alert, doing things, we're in beta. Then when we start to meditate, we start to slip down into alpha. And this brainwave state is like this, it's almost called a flow state. It's where your conscious mind slightly turns off and you're not really thinking about anything. You're not thinking about much. You're kind of still in this flow state where you can move your body in alpha. You can still move around and do things, but you are extremely relaxed and your conscious mind is not running anymore as high as it was in beta. You're, again, like I said, you're not thinking about much. You're kind of just in this relaxed flow state of nothingness. So this is the brainwave state that's ideal for spell work, because you can still move your body and do your spell and do what you need to do, but you're extremely relaxed and you've turned off your conscious mind slightly and turned off those filters so that you have greater access to your subconscious mind and everything that's beyond the subconscious mind, everything that's more spiritual on the astral plane, etc. Then if you go deeper into your meditations, you hit theta. And theta is a very, very deep trance state. At this point, you are not moving your body. Think of like when you're asleep, you know, there's delta below that, and delta is when you're definitely asleep and you're not moving. But theta is like you're in a light sleep stage where you're not moving your body anymore. It's so hard to get into theta, that brainwave state, and not fall asleep. So that's something that people really work a long time to master, to go into these deep trances without actually falling asleep. And so this brainwave state is really great for going on shamanic journeys, or, you know, doing a lot of work in the astral realm. You really want to try to get into theta. So I hope that answers the question. You'll know when you've reached alpha when your brain isn't really running anymore and you're just extremely relaxed. You don't have a string of thoughts. You're just in this nice flow state. I should probably add though the caveat, you don't necessarily know you're in alpha when you're in alpha, and you don't know you're in theta when you're in theta. And that's kind of the complicated part, because you are turning your conscious mind off, right? You're not necessarily thinking consciously anymore. And so if you're sitting there meditating with your eyes closed and you're thinking to yourself, am I there yet? Am I in alpha? Am I in theta? You're probably not. You're probably still in beta, because you want to get that inner monologue to shut off a little bit. And then when you're in alpha, it's this flow. There is no inner monologue constantly running. And then in theta, you just, like I said previously, you really don't know until you come out of it. Once you come out of that trance, you're able to go, oh yeah, I was in theta because I basically lost the ability to move my body because I was so deep in that meditation and my conscious mind was not running. I was purely in my subconscious. Like, you will be able to feel, you'll be able to know that you're in theta because it's so deep. And same when you come out of alpha, you'll be able to look back on that experience and say, oh yeah, my mind did slow down a lot. I was much more relaxed. I was probably in alpha. And just like beta, there are varying levels of alpha too. Like, you can have a light alpha state, which is basically when you're just slightly relaxed. You don't have that string of inner monologue as much anymore. And then you have a deep alpha state, like right before you get into theta, where you are in a really nice deep meditation. But you'll have to play around with this because, again, it's different for everybody, but that's kind of generally what I would say. My question is related to my last meditation. Have you ever encountered a strange, perhaps unsettling figure while in a trance or meditation? And if so, did you search for an answer who it was? Did you find the answer? My meeting today brought me out of my trance, unfortunately. I tried to find out what was going on in another meditation, but without result. Yes, I have definitely had this happen before, and sometimes when I'm meditating, some entities kind of bump into me and then I never see them again, which is incredibly frustrating because it's like no matter how many meditations you try to do after that, you can't find them again. And it's probably because they don't want to be found for some reason. Either they don't want to interact with you, or maybe they weren't ready to reveal themselves to you, or some other reasoning. So if you're not able to bump into that deity, not deity, but entity again, then it probably means that they don't really want you to. But if you really want to be persistent, then you can sit down and try to draw some tarot cards about it. Or if you have another form of divination that you like, some people like to do scrying, where you just dim the lights a little bit. You get either a black mirror or an obsidian, like a shiny piece of obsidian. You can even scry into a pool of water. Just let your eyes soften a little bit, go into a meditative state, like a light alpha brainwave state, and then see if any images come up for you. So I would definitely recommend, if you're doing a meditation, like follow-up meditation, and that entity isn't showing up again for you, try to do some tarot or another form of divination to get some clarity on it. But yeah, I would just say sometimes it's just a frustrating experience where you accidentally bump into an unsettling creature and then you never see him again. And you're like, okay, great. What was that for? Thanks for nothing. Thanks for pulling me out of my meditation. What is your suggestion to develop the ability to enter the alpha brainwave state on command? I would love to hear about it, and also have more books for chaos magic and psychic ability development. Okay, so a couple different questions here. So as far as suggestions to enter the alpha brainwave state on command, you can always program a trigger. So what you would do is you would find some sort of positioning for your body, or positioning of your hands. Like if you can think of, you know, the stereotypical, this hand gesture, I forgot what mudra this is. I totally spaced what this is right now. But anyways, there are specific hand gestures that you can use to program as triggers. You can have your hands like this, like this. You can have your hands like this, like this, whatever you want. But pick a positioning for your hands to be in that your hands are typically not in your waking life, and only do that hand positioning when you're meditating. And when you create that link inside your mind, eventually it gets to a point where every time you do that hand trigger, it automatically starts to get you deeper and deeper into the meditation. Your body's getting ready to go in meditation the moment that you put your fingers together in that trigger. So program a trigger for yourself. It doesn't even have to be hand positioning or body positioning. You can do a specific scent. So if there's a specific scent that you always burn or you always have going when you're meditating, that will help you each time get deeper and deeper into a meditative state and help you reach alpha a lot faster. You know, so some people like to burn mugwort, or what you can burn, whatever it is. You can make your own incense blend specifically for altered states of consciousness, and then it tricks your brain every time you burn that. Your brain already starts getting into the process of meditation and trying to slip down into alpha. So I love psychological triggers. I think they make the process so much easier. Just get a routine for yourself. Get a scent, get a body positioning, get, you know, something sensory that tricks your body into getting into that state. And as far as books go for chaos magic and psychic development, so for chaos magic, I think I recommended 3 chaos magic books on my What is Chaos Magic video. So those 3 books are the books that I always recommend people starting with. But beyond those 3 books, because I think it was Condensed Chaos by Phil Hine, Libernal and Psychonaut by Peter Carroll, obviously those 2 are staples. And then there was another book, Hands-on Chaos Magic. I forgot who the author is, but that was the 3rd one that I had recommended that had a lot more of a, I think, a practical approach with some applications and some exercises. Beyond that, literally anything written by Peter Carroll or Phil Hine is going to be great for chaos magic. A lot of people don't like Peter Carroll's books though. They don't resonate with that vibe. So if you do not enjoy Libernal and Psychonaut, don't even bother with the other ones. It's a specific flavor. Like, chaos magic books are weird. Whenever I recommend chaos magic books, people are reading these books and they always tell me these are not easy to read. And I'm like, I know. Trust me, I know chaos magic books are not easy to read. And I also feel like there is a lack of literature on chaos magic. It's really hard for me to recommend more books than that because I read other chaos magic books and I really don't care for them. And chaos magic is so individual. It's so based on personal gnosis that it's almost like you can't even write a book about chaos magic. It gets really complicated. So I think it's so funny because chaos magic is the one thing I really do practice, that I identify with, yet it's the one paradigm that I have the least amount of books on. You know, like if you ask me about witchcraft, I've got a million witchcraft books that I can recommend. You ask me about shamanism, I've got a million books that I can recommend about shamanism, you know? So, but then when it comes to chaos magic, it's so based on the practitioner's experience that it's hard to recommend books or even write books about it. And as far as books for psychic development goes, I do have a video on how to develop psychic abilities, but I specifically did not recommend any books in that video because I personally have not found any that I like. Everything that I know is based on my own personal experience working with altered states of consciousness and enhancing the psychic abilities that I personally have. So I wish I had recommendations, but unfortunately I have not read a psychic ability book that I like. So I'm currently still looking for some good resources there. Now we are getting into the category of my personal life and my personal magical practice, and also just my personal experiences doing magic in general. So the first question is, I was wondering how your rune set turned out as far as communication goes. I'm beginning my work with Tahuti soon, and I was wondering if you had any updates on how they worked out. I'm actually thinking I might make a deck for personal communication. So for anyone that may have missed it, I did a video showing my relationship with Thoth and how that was going. I ended up making a glyph set for him to communicate with him through, because I was not able to communicate with him as well through my meditations and through regular tarot. So I made my own glyph set. I came up with my own hieroglyphs or whatever and created my own divination set so that I could speak to him a little bit better. So the update on that, it is the best divination system I have ever had. Oh my God, there is something about making your own set created completely out of your own subconscious mind and your own connections to the world. It's so accurate. It is so accurate. The communications with Thoth have been totally life-changing, and I've been wanting to update you all because it totally worked and our communication has been awesome. I pull a glyph each week, so I pull one glyph a week just to get a general feel for the week and what Thoth really wants me to focus on for that week. And it has been very accurate, like way more accurate than my tarot readings. So if you're thinking about creating a divination system for yourself, do it. This is your sign to do it. Create that glyph set or that rune set or your own oracle card set, whatever, because it's like I have a deeper, like such a deeper connection to it than any other divination system, and the communication has been fantastic. So yeah, definitely make your own deck for personal communication. You'll probably have a much better time communicating if you do. The next question is, I have a friend that made a haunted toy. It was a Furby knockoff that looked creepy, and she did a ritual to invite a spirit to inhabit it. Have you ever done a similar thing? I'm thinking of doing something similar myself, and just was curious about others' experiences with the subject. This question is so chaos magic, fuck around and find out. Like when I was reading this, it's so funny. Okay, so I want to say yes. I want to say I have done this in the past because I'm sure I have at some point. I don't have any sort of memory coming to mind though of actually doing this. I feel like when I create servitors though, and I'm housing them in specific things like a dollhouse, like a genie lamp right behind me here, and having these servitor entities living in different objects, I feel like that's kind of the same thing. The only difference is that the servitor comes from me because it's a thought form, an extension of my own psyche, whereas it sounds like this particular situation is an external spirit that does not derive from you. Actually, you know what? No. Okay, so I do a whole creepy village. If you've seen one of my really older vlogs, every Halloween or around Samhain, I have this creepy dollhouse village that I set up. I forgot what it's called, but it's like the little dollhouse structures and they're all haunted themed. And so I set that up in the bay window of my living room, and then I have this tiny little coin with a fae creature on it, and I have enchanted this coin to basically be a house for any spirit that wants to come in. And I put that coin in the haunted village, and I leave that village open for any spirits that want to come in and inhabit the space. The caveat though is that I always have some sort of filters on my house, so I do not allow trickster spirits into my home. I do not allow malicious entities into my home. I am only allowing good spirits, happy spirits, little cute house spirits that want to come hang out with me, that are in alignment with my own frequencies and my own highest good. So I'm not just like inviting anyone into my space. That would be extremely irresponsible, but I have done that. Yeah, I have enchanted objects for spirits to come and live in. And then I get extra spiritual activity in my home, which is so cool. I love working with spirits, so I am totally fine if they want to drop by for a couple nights, and it's like a motel, you know? The spirits can come in, stay the night in my creepy little dollhouse village, and then pass on by if they want to. So yeah, I mean, do it if you want to. Fuck around and find out. Just make sure you're being careful, you know, if you don't want to work with trickster spirits, maybe put a caveat in there saying that only spirits aligned with my highest good are allowed to enter this space, or maybe create a sigil above all of your windows and doors that you have drawn with like some blessed water or some oil or something over the windows and doors that is specifically designed to filter out bad or negative spirits. Tons of different ways that you can go about that, but do it. It's fun. I am wondering how much you talk about the occult or witchy part of your life to the people in your life that don't practice. Sometimes I talk about these things to my husband and he is politely interested, but in reality, not at all. So I often regret saying anything. It just feels so weird. Yeah, same here. My partner is not a magical practitioner at all. I mean, my partner will watch my videos if I ask them to, if it's something that I want their opinion on, but really the occult isn't their thing. Well, that's not true. I mean, they dabble a little bit, not as a practitioner, but they do listen to podcasts on the paranormal and learning about Aleister Crowley and things like that. When we met, my partner and I were both Buddhists, and I would say, whoop, the dog is moving the camera right now. I would say I was more of a Buddhist than they were. They were the type of Buddhist that like aligned with Buddhist ideals, but didn't actually do the practice at any point. So we do, and my partner is also very like philosophical and intellectual, so we do have a lot of conversations about religion and spirituality in general. But other than that, they're not interested in magic or witchcraft or whatever. They don't mind that I do it by any means, but so it's hard because this is something that I'm deeply invested in and I'm obsessed with, and That is partially why I started a YouTube channel, so I had people to talk to, because I had no one to talk to about it. I have a coven now, which is amazing, and I've got coven mates that I can talk to about witchy stuff, but other than that, I mean, I can't talk to my family, my partner's not really interested in it, and so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna create this YouTube channel so I can talk for hours and hours about this kind of stuff, and someone out there in the world will listen. Someone must be interested. So you're not alone. I just have to throw that out there. You are totally not alone. It's hard when your partner is not a practitioner and like you want to share this big important part of your life with them. And again, I mean, my partner will listen, like your partner. They're politely interested, but like not really at all. It does get weird and it does get awkward, especially when I'm coming out of my room and let's say I just like did a blood offering or something hardcore, and I come out and I'm like, oh, I just did a blood offering to my ancestors, you know, all casual, and my partner's like, cool, sounds good. So yeah, it's weird and awkward, I get it. Have you ever thought about just collecting all of your videos and lectures and just putting it in writing form to produce one really gorgeous book? I really think I would be the first to order, with your autograph, of course. Thank you, that's so sweet. I stop in between your videos to take notes. I'm not an ardent magician, but I'd love to know more. Would you make a video, if one demands, on how to work with animal correspondences, as you mentioned? And this person was referring to one of my videos where I talked about working with bones a lot more. I hesitate to talk about animal remains and working with blood and bones on a video because it's going to be automatically demonetized by YouTube. I am experimenting with more taboo topics, like the collaboration I just filmed yesterday talking about sex magic. That video, I have it up privately right now for channel members, and I'm going to post it hopefully publicly next week. But that video already, even as a private video, has been demonetized. It has flags all over it. Like, I'm not going to get paid for it because ads will not play on it. And so it's like, it's hard to talk about controversial things, not even just from a revenue perspective, because there's no revenue in videos like that. But even if I just wanted to share that knowledge with people, I feel like it could be misconstrued so much, and people are going to automatically assume you're being disrespectful to animals, you're doing animal sacrifices, you're doing all this crazy stuff. So I hesitate to make videos like this because I want to make it for the few people that will actually be respectful, but uploading a video like that for the general public to consume, I don't know. So I am experimenting a little bit with my content. You might see my content slightly get edgier and edgier as the year progresses, or as the years progress, because I'm kind of like testing the waters with that. Anyways, back to the part about writing a book and combining all of these videos into one gorgeous book. First of all, thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. So I am working on a book. I am working on my first book right now, and I've hesitated to say that to the public because it's something, I am such a perfectionist, and I want this book to have a lot of depth in it. I am very, very picky about books. I don't like fluff. And so this book is going to take me a very long time to write. I want it to be well researched. And so I hesitated to say I was writing a book because I don't want people to get excited and then be like, well, when are you doing it? When's it coming out? When? Because I'm like, I want to be able to provide it to you right now. Anyways, so it'll have some stuff that I can't make videos about, as well as some stuff that I have made videos about that I want to elaborate more on in a book format. So that's kind of where I'm at with that right now. That is on the horizon for sure. So the next person is asking actually a couple questions. So the first question is, you once said that you use malas in your magical practice. What does this look like? So for me, with my malas, a traditional mala has 108 beads, and I'm not really going to go into the spiritual significance of the number 108 in this video, but I definitely encourage everyone to look into it. The number 108, the number 1 and the number 0 and the number 8 all have meanings separately, and then they all have a meaning together. So it's a very, very spiritual number. So these traditional malas have 108 beads, and I use it to chant either my mantra or my intention phrase 108 times. So if I'm working with my malas in spell work, what I would do is, let's say I'm doing like a candle spell or something. I have my candle anointed, it's burning, maybe I've got a sigil on the candle, you know, whatever. I'll sit with my mala beads and I will hold it in my hand. I'll start with one. You know, there's usually like a big bead somewhere. There's like all the little beads and then like a big bead to tie it all together. So I'll start with the big bead and I'll slowly work my way through every single bead on that necklace. And with every bead, I am chanting my intention phrase 108 times. And let me tell you, that shit is effective. So that is how I use it now. I know a lot of people use it as a meditation tool. That is absolutely an option. There's actually a book. It's this book. It's The Magical Use of Prayer Beads, and it's the secret meditations and rituals for your Kabbalistic, Hermetic, Wiccan, or Druid practice. So I feel like no matter what kind of magical practitioner you are, even if you're an eclectic witch, if you want to start working with prayer beads is like a big umbrella term, and then malas is like a specific kind of prayer bead. But anyways, if you want to get into that type of magic, definitely pick up this book. I thought it was fantastic. There's so many different rituals in here that you can do with prayer beads. So not just a meditation tool and not just chanting your intention 108 times like I do, but yeah, that's kind of what I do for that. Next question is, you practice quite a few different things. How did you decide which practice to choose for a particular intention? And how do you go about it when you dive into a new subject? I wish I could say that I'm super methodical about my approach with chaos magic, but I truly just let the universe take me where it wants to take me. If I'm feeling inspired by something, I go with it. I go deep down that rabbit hole. I explore it. I see if it's something that, you know, I don't know, speaks to me, and then I learn everything that there is to know about the subject. I think that's just naturally how I am as a person. So I don't know if I can give advice as to how to go about learning a new subject other than follow your passion. Whatever totally ignites your passion, follow it and deep dive into it. So yeah, I mean, there really isn't a rhyme or reason. There's no decision-making process when I'm choosing a specific practice for a specific intention. It's all by feel. It's all by where my passion is taking me in the moment. And that's why I love chaos magic so much, because it's so freeing and you can really just jump and bounce around all over the place and do what feels good. Probably not the answer you were looking for, but that is the honest truth. The next question is, how have you dealt with people around you and their reactions in terms of identifying as a witch? I feel that many people aren't aware that witches exist and what it means to be a witch in modern times. I'm met with skepticism, presumptuous opinions, and stigma when I speak my truth. I also work in a highly scientific field, psychology, so I'm scared of what people would assume of me if they found out. Any advice? This is another area where I don't know if I have advice, because I am still in the broom closet to a handful of people in my life. As a healthcare practitioner myself, I don't want people from that part of my life knowing my spirituality. But the way that I frame it is, not everyone needs to know my political beliefs and not everyone needs to know my religious beliefs or my spirituality. So I just kind of pick and choose my battles. Some people will never know my spirituality, and that's absolutely okay. Just like some people will never know my political beliefs, and that's okay. I don't feel like we need to share every aspect of our life with literally every person. Some people really want to stand up on top of a mountain and declare who they are to the world, and I think that's beautiful and amazing and epic. Some people are a little bit more private. I myself am an introvert. I am very private. There are some things about me that other people will never know, and it's not just witchcraft, it's just other aspects of my life in general that I don't want them to know about, and I only want specific people in my life that I trust to know about me. So I kind of treat witchcraft the same as that, that I don't necessarily have to come out of the broom closet to everybody. But yeah, I think times are changing. I think this is something that every witch is struggling with right now, unfortunately. I love when people do come out of the broom closet though, and are able to talk to people who are maybe unfamiliar with witchcraft, who have that stigma, and can maybe potentially change their mind about it. And that's how we create change as a society, right? Is us coming out of the broom closet and having those hard conversations with people. So if you have to view yourself as a trailblazer, then you do that, because we are in the trailblazing era. We are breaking down the stigma, having the conversations with people, and it's not easy. I mean, if you think about the feminists like 50 years ago and how hard they had it, you know, when was the time where everybody was burning bras? I don't know when that was, but that sounded awesome. You know, they got a lot of hate. People didn't understand where they were coming from. You are a trailblazer right now. now, just like all of us are trailblazers. And it just speaks to the time that we're currently living in. And that's a challenge that we are going to have to face over the course of our lifetime in order to make it easier and better for future generations. I really hope that future generations of witches and occultists will have it much, much easier when it comes to having these conversations with people. So I'm hoping that the work that we do today in our generation will benefit future generations. We may not get to see that change, but I mean, the bright side is we have come so far from where we were. I mean, in the 1800s and even beyond that, you couldn't even say that you were a witch at all to anyone. It was a terrifying time to try to be a witch. So thinking about the 1900s and the 2000s, we are doing a lot better than we did in the past. So at least that's some forward progress. We'll get there eventually. It's just, it might not be for our generation. Next question is, what do we got to do to make this next stepping stone of getting a book deal done? I'm actually friends with this person. So anyways, so yes, yeah, I would really love a book deal. Any publishers watching this, let's get it going. I can write faster if I have a book deal. So right now I'm just kind of doing it on my own. But yeah, I mean, put the feelers out there. If anybody knows a publisher, send them my way. I would love to get a book deal going, because it would definitely motivate me to finish this giant behemoth a lot faster. Next question, your life, school, content creator, personal, spiritual research, so much research is very full. What is your time management routine? Oh my gosh, I wish I could say that I had an awesome time management routine. I really don't. I fly by the seat of my pants. I am random, and sometimes I don't focus on things that I should. Like, I gave an example, I think in part 1 of this, where I said that my schooling has really taken a backseat the past month, and I regretted it. I absolutely regret it. I was focusing way too much on other things. There's so many different things going on in my life, and I was not able to dedicate the time that I needed to dedicate to school. So I would not say that I have a very good time management routine. I would say that naturally I'm a person that enjoys being busy, because I really enjoy mental stimulation. Like, my brain needs to be stimulated at all times. I tend to get a little depressed when my brain is not stimulated. So I think that I'm driven to do all these different things because I don't want to be sitting around sad and depressed. So that is a great motivator. But I don't have a time management routine. If anybody has any tips, please comment them, because I don't want to lie and say that I have this amazing routine when I actually don't. And it may seem like I do, but that is false, and that is the illusion of YouTube. What is your favorite witchy, occult themed movie or TV show, and does it inspire your practice? I get so much inspiration from media, from pop culture, TV shows and movies and things like that. I think I've mentioned before, I'm not the biggest fan of movies specifically. I don't usually like movies for various reasons that I won't go into. Okay, I don't like movies because A, it's too much of a time commitment. I do not want to sit down for 2 to 3 hours and invest my time into watching a movie. B, they're very predictable. I have dated a lot of people in the film industry in various, like I've dated writers, I have dated actors and actresses, I have dated cinematographers and like boom crane operators and all that stuff. Anyways, I've dated people in the film industry, and watching movies with them has totally ruined it for me, because they critique every little thing, and so now I can't unsee that. So when I watch movies, I am critiquing every little thing and saying, oh, you should have done that better, they could have done that better, and I just don't. All movies for me are very predictable too. Like, when I watch a movie, I can predict the ending in the first 15 minutes, and I'm like, well, this was a waste of my time. And I also don't like the lack of character development in movies. I can't get totally invested in a character in a 2-hour movie or in a 3-hour movie or whatever. TV shows, on the other hand, I can get deeply invested in a character over an entire season or multiple seasons, and I love having that that ability to come back whenever I want to and just watch an hour, bite-sized chunks, and then I'm watching this character grow over an extremely long period. that is my jam. So don't like movies, but I do love TV shows. That was a rant that no one asked for. So what is my favorite witchy or occult themed movie or TV show, and does it inspire my practice? Literally anything that is fantasy related, anything. I'm into it. Like I mean, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, all that stuff. I love it. I use it all as inspiration. I think TV series, I'm really loving The Witcher. I love Shadow and Bone. Even the Eye of the World series, Wheel of Time series is what I'm talking about. I read the series, The Wheel of Time, not the whole series, but I read some of the Wheel of Time when I was younger, when I was a kid, and I saw they were coming out with the TV show. For one, it's not even remotely close to the book series, so I was super pissed off for a really long time because they completely switched so many things around. But in watching the Wheel of Time series, I actually do like it. I have to separate it in my mind and just pretend it's something totally different than the books, because it basically is, and just in my mind know that I'm watching something different. But if I'm able to separate that, I really love the Wheel of Time series, and totally, like, magic in TV shows absolutely inspires me. If I see a spell in a TV show, I'm like, how can I incorporate that into my magical practice? Is that a spell that I can recreate myself, or some sort of magical power or something? So yeah, definitely. You've touched on the importance of magical record keeping before, but I'm very curious about what you write, especially as a spell progresses. Are there things you're looking out for every day? My intuition and perfectionism strongly disagree about the necessary level of detail. Yeah, okay, so I think magical record keeping is so important, especially in the beginning of your practice. Not even just the beginning, but even in the intermediate stage is so important, because you want to get to that point where you know how your spells are manifesting, you know what to adjust, and also kind of a time frame of how long does your spell take to manifest? You know, like, did it take a month? Was it a couple weeks? And then also, what was the size of this spell? Do smaller spells manifest quicker than larger spells? You know, so you have to figure that out for yourself, and it's really helpful because now I can sit down, cast a spell, and know approximately about how long it's going to take for it to manifest. I will say now in my magical practice though, I have been terrible at record keeping. I would say the past year or so, I have not been good at all, because I've got to this point where I know myself. I know how my spells manifest, and I know what to ask for. I know how to phrase things. And so I don't really need to keep a record anymore, because I kind of know they're just going to do what I want them to do. So yeah, I think that you get to this point, or you have lows where you're not record keeping as much. I'm sure I will go back into my magical record keeping. But basically, okay, so what I do is I write down what the spell is, I write down the ingredients and the process, and then I basically don't look at it again until the spell manifests. So once the spell has manifested, then I go back to that journal entry and I write down how it manifested and how long it took to manifest. And then from those two things, you're able to kind of deduce, okay, was this the most effective way of going about things? How long did it take, etc. So really, while the spell is manifesting, I don't keep track of anything. I do not write down anything until it has fully manifested. In fact, sometimes I forget that something has manifested until I actually go back into my journal, and then I realize, oh, that one already manifested. Okay, it's time to update the magical journal, and I can write down how it manifested and all of that stuff. But in the beginning, I would say it's a lot of journaling in the very beginning, because you're writing down everything that you're doing, all the ingredients you're using, etc. And then it's a lot of journaling at the end, a lot of recap, but nothing in between. That's just my own method, so I hope that that helps. I know that everybody does it a little bit differently. You've been to several sacred places in different parts of the world. Has there ever been one where right after arrival, get out was the prevailing vibe? Why do you think that was? Actually, no, I've never really been anywhere where I was feeling the get out vibe. That would be, I have been a thrill seeker. I have gone to haunted houses and haunted places. I've gone to a lot of sacred ancient sites across the world because I love to travel, and I have not hit that point where I get the creepy feeling. I have not gotten the creepy vibes. I've even spent a night in a graveyard. I've done this on multiple occasions, trying to get a creepy vibe and trying to like mess around with the spirit. Nothing, no creepy anything. So I wish I had a fun story, but I don't know. All the places have been super welcoming. Spirits have been great. Maybe I'm not doing the right things. I don't know. I don't know what it is. I am wondering if you also do creative things in your craft, like making candles or any artwork, but in a magical kind of way. If yes, then what and how? And if not, is it something that you'd like to go for in the future? Yeah, I feel like I'm a pretty creative person. I would say I'm not, okay, how do I say this? I'm not a crafty person, I'm a creative person. Like, I'm not often crafting things with my hand, but I am extremely creative in the way that I put things together. So I feel like my style, when I do spell work, it is art. It is artistic. But I would say in the more traditional, like crafty sense, I do watercolor painting. I love watercolor painting. It's so freeing. It's so abstract. You can paint sigils into the watercolors, and then because they're watercolors, you paint the sigil in, and then you can drop water onto it, and then it just kind of dissipates. It dissipates that way. So it's a really awesome way to get creative with your sigils and charge them up as you're painting them down on paper. But then once you drop the water in, you are activating the sigil. Obviously you want to charge it first, like go into an altered state of consciousness, charge it up, all that. But then you drop the water in, and when it dissipates, that's a way of destroying the sigil. Rather than using fire, you're using water to destroy the sigil. So it kind of depends on like what the sigil is for, whether I want fire to destroy the sigil or water, or maybe if I want to bury it in the earth, etc. But I definitely use watercolor paintings in my sigils. I should probably show that a lot more. I just don't, because I didn't think anybody would want to watch me sit down and paint my watercolor paints. I'm not very good. That's the thing, is that like I'm decent, but I'm not great. And I would love to get into candle making. That's actually my next adventure, is getting into candle making. So yes, that sounds very fun. What is your favorite type of music? And also, have you used music as ambiance for your spells? All the time, for every single spell. I am almost always having some sort of music on. It really just depends on the vibe. I really love like Nordic folk metal is awesome, or listening to Wardruna or things like that. There's a bunch of other bands that are similar to Wardruna. Like I saw High Lung in concert. High Lung is another fantastic band. I love that. It sounds so alluring, and it connects you to your ancestors. It's so indigenous and delicious, and oof, it just gets you in the right vibes. So I love listening to that kind of music. There's, I mean, binaural beats I'll listen to, or more atmospheric, relaxing stuff if I'm trying to do a meditation. I love listening to shamanic drumming. There's some shamanic drumming tracks that I really like, and I listen to those anytime I want to go on a journey, because the repetitiveness of the drums is really helpful to get you into that altered state of consciousness. But like this morning, I was listening to Vivaldi, and if no one's familiar, it's classical music. I listen to all different types of music. Sometimes I'll listen to Disney songs. If I'm doing some chaos magic and I'm working with a very specific archetype from pop culture, from a TV show or a movie or whatever, I'm going to be listening to the soundtrack of that character as I'm working with them during ritual. So it totally is dependent on the vibe. My taste changes pretty much every single day. I also hyper focus into songs, and I'll listen to one song 900,000 times until I hate it and I never want to listen to that song ever again. And then I will switch to a new song, and then I'll have a new obsession that I listen to 900,000 times. So I cannot give an answer as to what I love on the regular basis, because it changes literally all the time. How chaos magician of me. Okay, now we're moving to the controversial section, which is really more about cultural appropriation. I'm putting this in a category all in itself, so if people don't want to have the conversation about cultural appropriation, they just don't care to listen to it, feel free to skip it. I know it's a hot topic and not everyone wants to talk about this, so if you feel like you don't want to listen to that, that's fine. You can skip to another timestamp, and then after the cultural appropriation conversation, we'll go into mental health. So let's talk a little bit more about cultural appropriation, closed practices, things like that, because I had two questions in this category. The first one is, do you have any advice on how to engage in more in-depth research and exploration whilst being respectful and avoiding appropriation? For context, I'm in the UK and new to the witchy occult space. I've found great online resources like your channel, thank you, that's really sweet, that have been really informative and insightful, and I'm at the point where I'm wanting to follow my own instincts and look for in real life resources, shops, books, etc. The problem is I don't know know any other people interested in this stuff, and when I go out to occult shops in my city, I see a lot of appropriation in the space. For example, every shop I've been in has white sage and palo santo for sale. When less than a month into watching witchy content, I knew that these are problematic due to over-harvesting and indigenous communities losing access to them as a result. Devil's advocate, maybe that's not well known here, or maybe they're just selling through old stock, but it still makes me wary. Added to this, I would like to learn more about hoodoo as I'm a member of the African diaspora, but the only book I can find here so far is by a white English witch, and I can't find anything on where she got her information from. I know all communities have their problematic members or sides, but if you feel able to speak on it, any advice on how to navigate this would be really appreciated. So I always have a hard time talking about closed practices and cultural appropriation, as I am very clearly a white woman, and so I struggle knowing what to say and what not to say. Is it better for me to just keep my nose out of it because it's none of my business, or is it better for me to talk about it because I'm in a position where I should talk about it? I never really know what I'm supposed to do, so please just keep that in mind. I don't really know what the most appropriate course of action it is for me, but the second question is actually going more into how I feel about cultural appropriation, so we will talk about that. But what I will say, if something is truly a closed practice, like let's just talk about the hoodoo situation for a second. If something is truly a closed practice, it is going to be extremely difficult to find literature on it, and that is the problem, right? Because the only literature that you may potentially be able to find is either heavily influenced by misinformation by someone who maybe potentially claims that they're practicing hoodoo, but that's maybe not even what they're practicing. And so you might find things that have a ton of misinformation in it. Or if it is actually a closed practice and someone is writing a book about it and sharing it with the world, that person is going to get in a lot of trouble because it's a closed practice. So true closed practices, you almost have to kind of know someone in order to get in, which can be really incredibly frustrating for people that really want to be part of that closed practice. But that is the tricky part, because the literature that you're able to find on a closed practice, if it is a true closed practice, I'm not saying what practices are closed or not because that's none of my business, but if it is a true closed practice, it's going to be very, very hard to find accurate information, and that's done on purpose because people within that practice don't want the general public to have this knowledge. And again, the people that are sharing that information, either A, they're going to have people coming after them because they weren't supposed to share that information, or B, they're trying to pass something off as that closed practice when it's not that, and there is misinformation. So when navigating this whole thing, it's so tough. I wish I had good advice. I don't know if I do, because I am trying to navigate that myself. I will say that I don't think there's any harm in asking questions and learning, and if you do come across a piece of misinformation, cross-referencing it everywhere. I find that a lot of people are almost even scared to learn about other cultures because they're so scared that they're going to stumble into a territory they're not supposed to be in. And I think that is also a very, very slippery slope. I think it's important for all of us to learn about as many other cultures as possible. And if we do come across something that is more closed that you need to be initiated into, at least understanding the context of that and leaving it be and saying, okay, this is something that I'm not ever going to be able to know more about unless I'm actually initiated into that closed practice. So as far as like hoodoo specifically goes, I wish I had some resources for you. I clearly do not at all, and I feel for you. I really, really do, because it's something that's so difficult to navigate. But I want to kind of go into this next question so we can have a better conversation about this. So the next question is, what are your thoughts on people who are not part of that culture or practice engaging in closed practices or cultures? I will say that no matter what I say here, I'm gonna end up upsetting someone somewhere. My views on cultural appropriation and closed practices are right in the middle. I see the validity of both sides. I also think that there can be extremists on both sides. My general rule of thumb is, please don't practice a closed practice if you are not invited, if you are not initiated, if you are not a part of that indigenous culture. Please don't do that. However, I will say that what's up for debate is, what is a closed practice? What counts as a closed practice? Because that is where I find there is a huge argument and debate between people what they consider a closed practice and what other people consider a closed practice. Nobody seems to be able to agree on what that actually means. And I feel like some people are claiming that some things are closed practices when really they're not. And then some things are closed and people are just doing it anyways. So it's a really, really complicated mess. I usually try to stay right in the middle. I want to be respectful, but I also think that it's important for us to learn about each other's cultures when the opportunity presents itself. I feel like I need to give a better example here because it sounds like I'm talking in circles. I think everything needs to be treated on a case-by-case basis. For example, I have Native American friends. If I am having my friend who is Native American come over to my house, we have a really close connection, I have learned about their culture, and if they want to show me an indigenous practice in the safety of our own homes, if I'm inviting them over for tea or they're inviting me over for whatever, am I allowed to practice that indigenous practice later on when they're not here? I would say that it is a very much a case-by-case basis. In that case, if I have a Native American friend that I have personally connected to, I've gotten to know the culture, I have been invited in, even though I am not Native American, I can learn that tradition from them, and with permission, I can incorporate that into my magical practice. And then sure, yeah, I can absolutely do that Native American tradition in my own home. The problem is when people start to turn around and try to capitalize on it and then try to teach other people when it's not their culture to teach. So if I were to turn around and try to make a video on an indigenous Native American ritual that I learned from my friend, and if I were to teach other people as a white woman and then also get money from it because I'm uploading a YouTube video and I get paid from ad revenue on this, that is where we get into cultural appropriation, and that's where I think it's not appropriate whatsoever. So in the privacy of your own home, if you have this Native American friend that has showed you something that's important to her culture, then yes, absolutely incorporate some of that into your practice. Honor that culture. But when it comes to sharing it with other people, capitalizing on it, that is where things get sticky and gross and weird. But again, everything needs to be treated on a case-by-case basis. So there is an academic panel that I would recommend for everybody. I already know I'm gonna get so much hate for my view on this because I'm right in the middle. I truly do see both sides, but I also think we need to be respectful of closed practices. I also think we need to not be afraid to learn about other cultures. There is a middle ground, you guys. There is a middle ground to this conversation. So anyways, there's this academic panel that Dr. Angela Puka did on her channel, and she had a couple different academics join, and they had a whole long conversation about cultural appropriation, what it actually is, because people don't actually know what cultural appropriation is. People are claiming that things are cultural appropriation when it's not. So I encourage everyone to go watch that panel. I'll link it in the description box if you're interested, but definitely go watch that panel. I really agree with a lot of the stuff that was said on that panel, and I know I'm gonna get a lot of hate for this because on one end of the spectrum, people are gonna say that I'm not defending closed practices enough, and then on the other end of the spectrum, I am pretty much the only, well, I'm one of the very few chaos magicians that I personally know that actually does respect closed practices, because chaos magicians tend to say, fuck you, I can do whatever I want. So I think I'm gonna be alienating a lot of people by posting this. I'm really actually nervous to talk about it because as someone who's right in the middle and I can see both sides and believing there's a middle ground and believing that everything has to be on a case-by-case basis, I think that's going to piss off literally everybody watching this. So there's my answer. One thing I do want to add to this though is I am really nervous for the future. I don't want people to get nervous learning about other cultures because they fear that they're going to slip into a closed practice and they doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And once we stop learning about each other's cultures, that is such a dangerous place to be in. I really think it's important for us to share different cultures and customs with each other, within reason, of course. Again, I'm still respecting actual closed practices. I just don't want people to become afraid to even research other cultures for fear that they may stumble into something. And this isn't relating to the two people that are asking these questions. I'm just talking in general. I've gotten a lot of comments on my videos where people will comment, can I even research this? Am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? For one, don't ask me for permission because I'm a white woman. I absolutely can't give you that permission. And for two, I think it's so important to learn and broaden our horizons. And if you do you accidentally end up in a territory of a closed practice, be respectful and get out. But again, most people don't even know what a closed practice actually is, and they're claiming things are closed when they're not. Anyways, did I sufficiently upset everyone with that conversation? Great, let's move on to mental health. So the first question in this category is, as both a psychologist and an occultist, do you have any advice on how witchcraft can manage ADHD or depression alongside therapy? For me, it's really hard to practice witchcraft, mainly because I'm easily distracted or daydreaming and I can't focus for very long. So first of all, I have to say I'm not a psychologist. I wish. Thank you for thinking that I'm a psychologist, but no. I am a student of psychology. I am still working on my degree, but I am not a psychologist, so I can't really give any professional advice here whatsoever. I also have never really struggled with ADHD. I have struggled with depression pretty much my entire life though, and I do find that Magick helps immensely with depression. But I think your question is geared more towards ADHD. So I would say if you're having a hard time, if you get easily distracted or you're daydreaming, can't focus for long, I mean, I do know that meditation can help with stuff like that, but the thing is, my partner has ADHD. My partner, it has very severe ADHD. I mean, the test results, it's like the highest score that you can possibly get for ADHD. And for my partner, traditional meditation doesn't work. It does not help them. So what we found is going on shamanic journeys and doing visualizations is really helpful because you're still somewhat meditating, so it's helping you gain focus, but it's also taking your brain on a little journey. You're listening to this story essentially, and your brain has something to do throughout the whole meditation. So you're not just sitting there silently, crossing your legs, counting your breaths, and having your mind run a million miles a minute. With shamanic journeying or even just guided visualizations in general, you can have this guided visualization walk you through a park or going to a forest or going to a desert, going on all these different adventures, and your brain is able to create this imagery, this color, this activity, and just gives your brain something to do while you're in that meditation. So you're still able to achieve an alpha flow state. You're still able to meditate and strengthen your abilities to focus, but it's not the traditional meditation that sucks where you just have to sit in silence and whatever. So I would suggest, I know it's really, really tough for a person with ADHD to establish a regular practice of meditation, but even if you can incorporate those types of meditations, visualizations, shamanic journeys, things like that, to start getting you into that, I think that would be really helpful for your spiritual and your magical practice in general. And there's also this thing of object impermanence. Object impermanence, permanence. It's the thing with ADHD where if you don't see it, it doesn't exist. So you really have to have everything visually out in front of you, because if you don't see it, you're gonna forget about it. It's in the back of your mind, it's already gone. Like for example, in my kitchen, in my fridge, for my partner, because of the object impermanence, I have things arranged a certain way so that they don't forget what kind of food that we have in the fridge. So I have it arranged to where you can see basically everything, and then condiments, for example, I put in the bins where you don't ever see them, because condiments, you're only ever going to use condiments when you actually need to put it on something, when you're actually searching for it. So in the produce drawer, you know, all the produce I would actually put out on the shelf so you can see it, and then it doesn't go bad in the fridge. So I think the same applies to a magical practice, having your tools out and having everything out so you can visually see it, or having clear storage bins for all of your oils or candles or whatever, maybe putting it out on beautiful shelves, and just making your environment very friendly for someone who has ADHD, I think can help a magical practice. I know it might be tough to actually focus in the moment of doing a spell, but even if you're able to just see your tools around you and feel magically ignited, to feel spiritually connected in that moment, and you're just sitting down to light some incense, that is perfectly fine. So yeah, working with that object impermanence and just making sure that everything is visually, that you're able to see everything, I think would really, really help, in combination with those guided meditations that actually allow your brain to play and to create some imagery so you can start working on building up that focus for longer periods each time. I hope that helps. I think the next question is about ADHD as well. So the next question is meditation, getting in the right headspace for the craft with ADHD and the internal dialogue won't shut up. How have you been able to develop focus? I will say, as a person without ADHD, it's still extremely difficult to develop focus. It is not an easy task, even for the most average mundane person. I was a Buddhist for about 5 years before I went back into paganism afterwards, and I was meditating almost every single day as a Buddhist, because I did Zen Buddhism and that was part of my spiritual practice, and I was working up to longer meditations. Even so, it took probably a good 9 months of regular meditation to even get to the point where I could sit down for a 15 minute meditation without feeling like my brain wouldn't shut up. It was so frustrating. So I think we have this idea about meditation that we're supposed to be good at it after like a couple weeks of meditating regularly, when really it can take months to develop that skill, that ability in your brain. So I don't want to discourage people, but I do want to set, I don't know, some sort of expectation that it is not something that's quick, and it takes a lot of dedication. At least for me it did. It took a lot of dedication of regularly meditating in order to get to that place where I felt like my brain would shut up just a little bit. And I don't even have ADHD, so I can only imagine how difficult that is. Again, as I previously mentioned, maybe finding a different way of meditating might be helpful for you. Those guided visualizations, also going on meditative walks, going on a nature walk and just trying to relax and calm your mind and just focus on your surroundings and being really mindful. You can also be extremely mindful as you're eating and have a full sensory experience. You know, you like sit down with an orange and then you slowly peel the orange, you smell the orange, it's all like zesty and makes your mouth water, and then you slowly take a piece of it, you put it in your mouth, savor it, you slowly swallow it. That process of eating an orange can be a super mindful meditative experience. So again, you don't have to be sitting down doing traditional meditation. You can be doing mindfulness acts like eating that orange slowly and really bringing in all of your senses as you're eating it to really try to help get your brain to focus on one specific task. You are eating that orange and you are doing nothing else. You are smelling the peel, you are looking at the color, you are peeling it, you are tasting it, all of these things. Bring in all of your senses and actually physically do something. So yeah, you can definitely get creative with your meditative practice. You're not alone with that frustrating internal dialogue. Just know that you're not alone with that. It does just take time and patience. And if anybody else has additional tips and tricks, I mean, obviously my partner has severe ADHD that we are working on, and so I know of some tricks because of that, but I don't personally experience it myself. So if anybody else has tips and tricks for that, please put them in the comments for other people to read. That would be so lovely. How did you get over second guessing yourself or feeling silly or embarrassed? I find it so hard to believe in the validity of my spirituality. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. So this is a question I feel like I could unpack over the course of like a 20-minute video. You know what I should really do? I should take some of these questions and make a whole video about it and really expand on it, because this question in particular, how to get over second guessing yourself or feeling silly or embarrassed or anything. There's so many different angles I want to tackle that. But to keep it short and sweet for the Q&A at least, I would say that the times that I'm feeling silly or embarrassed or feeling like my spirituality is invalid, it typically means that I am not connected with my own power. For some reason, I'm feeling just not as powerful as I would like to. So if you're feeling a little silly, a little embarrassed, I would suggest stepping into your power, finding things that make you feel immensely powerful. Whether you watch a TV show or a movie that there's a character you resonate to that makes you feel powerful, or if there's some badass music you want to put on, maybe there's a certain perfume that you put on that when you smell it, you feel like an absolute god or goddess or whatever you identify as. And also working through different parts of a spiritual awakening can also help this and make you feel powerful. But so that's a subject in itself that I really want to expand on a little bit more. But if you find that some of the terminology is a little silly, like if you're sitting down and casting a spell and you just don't like that word spell because it feels really silly to you, unfortunately with Hollywood and TV shows and movies and all that, it's portrayed witchcraft a certain way and it can feel silly sometimes. So if that word in particular is invoking a feeling of embarrassment or silliness or whatever, yes, there is so much to unpack with that, but you don't have to use that word. You can call it a working, you can call it a manifestation. So maybe changing some of the terminology around it. If you don't feel comfortable calling yourself a witch right now, because that makes you feel silly, maybe call yourself something else and then do some shadow work around that word, why you feel like it makes you feel silly. Because as I said, there is so much to unpack with a question like this, but to just keep it simple for right now, I think tapping into your power, finding things that make you feel powerful with scents, with music, colors, things like that can be really helpful and help you get over that somewhat embarrassment. But I think a lot of this is going to be shadow work. When it comes to believing in the validity of your own spirituality, that's something that goes much deeper than just the current aesthetics that you're working with. That is definitely a shadow work thing. So I'm going to make a mental note to potentially do a video about this. I know you might have touched on this a little in one of your previous videos, but I was wondering if you could recommend and talk about some ways to grow and trust your intuition. Still, my biggest hurdle in my practice is trusting myself and the things I may be experiencing. I am way too over analytical, and I worry sometimes it really holds me back or even creates blocks in the flowing of energy, because there's a part of me that feels like the cosmos will be annoyed or upset with me for not receiving and accepting what's being shown and given fully. I know you've dealt with similar things, so I need the IV gnosis on this one. This is such a tough question. I think I did maybe talk about this in, I think one of my other Q&As. I talked about ways to kind of slowly build your intuition. I think one of the ways I talked about just doing really, really simple forms of magic. Simple forms of magic such as like manifesting a parking spot. You know, I'm talking really, really simple forms of magic. And then every time you manifest what it is that you want, you reward yourself in some way. You acknowledge that you had a successful spell. You make note of it, you celebrate it, even if it's the smallest thing in the entire world, but you're building a positive feedback loop in your brain so that you are encouraged to trust your intuition a little bit more each time. I think I said it, like, I think I went way more in depth in that other Q&A, but I honestly can't even remember what I said. But I think this kind of goes back to everything that we've been talking about being a mad scientist. If you are truly a scientist, which I don't know if you resonate with the mad scientist archetype or not, or even just a sciencey mind in general, if you're an analytical person, it is a scientist's job to remain open-minded to the fact that they are wrong. I've said that a couple times throughout this two-part series now, and I think that kind of plays into this question as well, when being super overly analytical about your spell work, about manifesting, really questioning the messages you're getting from the universe. If we are good scientists, if we are good rational people, we can be skeptical while also knowing that there is a possibility that we are totally, utterly wrong, and remaining open to the possibility of something else being out there. So kind of keeping that in mind, I think, can help with the over analytical nature as well. But I really think working more with like a positive feedback loop, I think that would be my advice for today. I'm sure if I sat down, you know what, maybe this is another video topic that I should do as well. If I sat down and actually really thought about it for a couple days and started to write a whole list, I would probably have a lot more to go off of. So this is my mental note to myself, editing IV, add this to the list of video ideas so we can explore this topic a little bit more. But yeah, the positive feedback loop I think is really helpful, just celebrating every tiny little success you have with your intuition, and you are encouraging yourself to trust your intuition more as you do this. So I hope that helps for now. I know it's so hard. I still struggle. I'm 15, 20 years into my practice and I still struggle because sometimes I am too overly analytical, I am too skeptical. So I also think that if that's just who you are as a person, you're probably gonna struggle with this for like, you know, the next 15 years, no big deal. Hate to break it to you. It's like, it's a lifelong struggle with that one. How do you balance mundane and magic so well with all you do? I often feel guilty like I'm not doing enough to really grow. I know this can also be a scary mindset and bring on some burnout if I'm not careful, so I wanted to attack this sooner rather than later. I must come off way more balanced than I actually am in real life. So if it makes you feel better, I do not have a balance at all. That is something that I am constantly working on as a work in progress human. You are always doing enough. You are always doing enough. I don't want people to think that because they see all this stuff on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube that they feel like they're not doing enough for their magical practice, their space isn't aesthetic enough, they're not doing enough spell work, they're not doing whatever. You are doing enough, and I promise. I think the only way that I still have a connection to my magic after all these years is because for me, magic is an outlet. It's an expression of my creativity. My magic has helped with my mental health issues over the years. And so for me, it's very easy to stay connected to my craft because it's how I creatively express myself. It gives me life. It brings me joy. And if it's not giving you life and not bringing you joy, and you're finding that your magical practice is more of a chore, there's something going on there, and you might want to switch up what it is you're actually doing in your magical practice, because you might be forcing yourself to do things that other people are doing that don't resonate with you at all. I know some witches that never cast a spell. They never cast spells. They primarily work with plants. They just work with plant spirits. They're super into herbalism and making concoctions, and that's what they do because it's fun and rewarding for them. It does not mean that they are less of a witch because they never cast spells. So you just have to find the style of magic that really ignites your soul, makes you excited. It's a creative outlet for you, because if your magical practice is becoming somewhat like a chore in order to keep up, that's not the magical practice for you. And also, like we were talking about earlier, I think in part 1 is where I was talking about how everything can be seen as magical. Everything in the mundane world can be magical if you want it to be magical. So feel free, if you haven't checked out part 1, I definitely talked about that. The last question in this category is about fear. So I seem to have subconsciously bound myself magically due to fear. I think I'm afraid of my own power. Can you give any tips or advice on how to face and accept the fears of awakening one's true power and potential? Along the same lines, I am also blocking myself from getting into altered states of consciousness to interact with guides and deities. I can get signs and confirmations, do divination readings, and have inner dialogues with them, but when it comes to more physical manifestations or crossing into astral dimensions, I block myself out of fear. I would really appreciate any insights. So fear is a really complicated thing, and it's really important to figure out where your fear is coming from. A lot of people's fears are simply because we fear things that we don't understand. And so in taking the time to research and better understand these things, we can kind of dissuade our fears. But if your fear is coming from maybe some societal brainwashing, maybe some brainwashing from your childhood, sometimes shadow work is really necessary for getting over that fear, especially as it pertains to your own power. Because some of us are told pretty much our entire lives that we are weak, that we are supposed to be submissive and subservient, that we are supposed to be a cog in the wheel, that we aren't supposed to ask questions, we're definitely not supposed to be powerful. There are people in power that want us powerless. And this can be parents or guardian figures, this can be a school system, this can be the government in general. There's a lot of people out there our entire lives telling us that we aren't powerful and teaching us not to tap into our personal power. So I think a lot of it has to do with societal conditioning and brainwashing. And so deconstructing that is a whole process on a spiritual awakening that you may be potentially going through right now. So I don't think I have an easy answer for you. I really don't, because when it comes to fear, it's so multi-layered, it's so complicated, but really figuring out and pinpointing exactly where your fear is coming from. I think the first step in this case would be to figure out why you fear your own power. Is it because your parents told you that you're not allowed to feel powerful? Is there some sort of connection there that you can explore? Is it because of institutions that you've been a part of have always told you that you're supposed to be subservient and that you're not supposed to step into your own power? I think, doing the shadow work and then also potentially working with dark goddess archetypes. Dark goddess archetypes are so powerful and amazing for helping people really step into their own, to reclaim their power and take up space. So maybe working with some sort of archetype like that would be incredibly helpful. But also there's another side to fear. There's the side of, well, I'm just fearful of the other entities that I'm going to encounter. You know, when you're going into the astral realm, it can be a little daunting, a little scary, because you don't know what to expect. You have no idea what's going on sometimes. And so it can be really scary to go into the astral realm, and you might find that you have barriers or blockages stages where you're not able to really transcend beyond that because you're so scared of something hurting you or harming you on the astral realm. And so to that, I would say that what I said in the beginning, where we fear things that we don't understand, I think it might be helpful to talk to people who are extremely knowledgeable in journeying the astral realm and hear their actual personal accounts. Maybe learn how to protect yourself a little bit more. So if you are fearful for a safety reason, not necessarily fearful of your own power, but just fearful just for your own safety, learn some really good methods of protecting yourself and get really good at it so you feel confident. Even if you were to run into a random entity that scares you, that you don't like it, you have the tools to get out of that situation and you know how to protect yourself. So again, just kind of figuring out why you feel fear in the first place is important. Are you fearing things from a safety issue? Are you fearing things because you've been brainwashed your whole life to think that you're not powerful? You know, there's a bunch of different ways to go about that. So I hope that gives you some sort of guidance. I don't know why I feel like I need to talk about the Dark Goddess right now, because that's not really something I really talk about. I'm just getting the vibes that, you know, maybe check out the Dark Goddess video that I have, because it can be incredibly empowering to work with that type of archetype. And that was all of the questions. I just wanted to say thank you so much again for 20,000 subscribers. I cannot believe that. That is wild. I think the channel already hit 21.7 at the time of filming this, so things are growing fast, which is crazy. Thank you so much again. I love these Q&As. I feel like they're so long though, and they take so much time to film and record, and so next time if I do a Q&A, I don't want to limit the questions though. I don't want to have to limit it to like 20 or 50 questions, because the conversation is so good that we end up having, but it just takes me a long time to get through them, and I really hope that I had enough brain power to answer all of those properly. So anyways, thank you all again so much. I will see you in a video soon. Bye everyone.